roll call.
Chair Ford,
Here.
Vice Chair O'Nines,
Here.
Commissioner Brady,
Here.
Commissioner Hancock,
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
And we've got some minutes from our last meeting on September 19th. Does anybody have any corrections to those minutes?
No.
I think to help Carrie, I'm going to ask for a motion and second this time.
I'll second.
Okay. All right. It's been moved and seconded. You want a roll call? Will that help your minute taking?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Chair Ford,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Nines.
Yes.
Commissioner Brady.
Yes.
Commissioner Hancock, Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
All right. On to any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no changes.
Okay. And on to oral and written communication. So members of the public are invited to step to the microphone and share your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to items not already on the agenda. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'll close that public comment, and we'll go straight to matters at hand. And there's one item, which is preliminary design review and use permit for a density bonus for the Katati Station Apartments. And we'll start with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask Carrie to switch us over to the PowerPoint, if she will. And while she's doing that, I want to call your attention to the Commission and the members of the public's attention to 3 items that were added to the packet after it was published on the web. One of those is a proposed additional condition of approval, which is titled Item F, Katati Station Apartments, PA 1318. The second item is a public comment letter from Lori Alderman. And the third item is the meeting minutes from the Design Review Committee meeting of August 29th, when that committee reviewed this project. So I just want to call everyone's attention to those. Moving on to the project. Yes, as you mentioned, this is the Katati Station Apartments project. The property is located in the Santara Way Specific Plan, which is roughly the areas along Santara Way, by our SMART station. The last time the Commission saw this project was in March of 2015, and Lori's going to go into detail in a few minutes, but at that time the project was part of a larger project involving lots both north and south of the existing development on the east side of of Santara Way. And tonight's project is only a portion of that 2015 project. It's the lots on the north side of the existing development. So there have been several changes, improvements to the project that we're going to talk about tonight, including the addition of a public park, reconfiguration of Santara Way at a pinch point in front of the existing park, and the addition of a community parking area on a city-owned parcel that the applicant has agreed to build with the project. And I just want to acknowledge that to the layperson, they're not going to see, with the addition of the changes that I just detailed, the project probably won't have appeared to have changed much to the layperson, so I just want to explain a little bit about why that is. And the way we've come to talk about it at the staff level is that the project hasn't changed so much as we've changed the regulatory lens through which we're reviewing the project. And by that I mean that before, the project was subject to local regulations, local-only regulations, and now through a revised application, the applicant has requested or applied for a use permit to take advantage of density bonus regulations, state density bonus regulations. So that is the change in lens that I'm talking about. So we're going to spend a few minutes here at the very beginning just sort of explaining what that means, and then we'll go on to talk about the actual project. State density bonus is a set, I often refer to it as a program, but that's really shorthand for sections of the government code, and they're cited up here on the screen. But there's sections of the government code which requires local agencies to grant a bonus of density and incentives or concessions to applicants providing any of the following. And so that is 10% of units set aside for lower income households, 5% of units set aside for occupancy by very low income households, a senior citizen housing development, or 10% of total units in a common interest development, say a condominium project, for occupancy by moderate income households. And so really these regulations are set up to help provide affordable housing. In the state, they recognize that we weren't producing, the state as a whole wasn't producing affordable housing in enough numbers and at a quick enough rate. So these regulations were adopted, I believe, back in 2006, somewhere around there, to help with that issue. And I'm going to ask Carrie if she could please turn down some or all of the lights, because I think in a minute when we get to numbers, it's going to be harder for the public to read. And so again, these are the minimum requirements. Could be, these are ors, not ands. So these are the minimum requirements that a development has to provide in order to take advantage of that set of regulations. And the way the process works is that an applicant submits a proposal for specific incentives or concessions. In other words, they tell us exactly what they would like the concession to consist of. And the local agency must grant those concessions unless we can make a written finding for any of these 3 bullet points up here in orange. And those are that the concession or incentive is not required in order to provide for affordable housing costs. The concession or incentive would have specific adverse impact upon public health and safety, the environment, or a state-listed historical property. Or third, the concession or incentive would be contrary to other state or federal laws. So a concession is defined in the government code as a reduction in site development standards or a modification of zoning code requirements or architectural design requirements that exceed the minimum building standards of basically the building code. So the citation is to the health and safety code, but it's essentially the building code. So it's everything above basic health and safety that's established by the building code. So an applicant can ask for a concession in any of those extra added on regulations that might exist. Approval, the applicant can also request approval of mixed-use zoning if other compatible uses would reduce the cost of affordable housing development, or other concessions that result in cost reductions to the project. So again, this is based on a premise that a bonus in density would require removing some standard requirement or exaction, which, if the local agency required it, would render the project infeasible. So this requirement for concessions is all about reducing the cost of providing affordable housing. And just to give you a couple of, to give you an example of that, maybe it's a street beautification project that is in the specific plan, and a development might have to implement that project. And I use beautification purposefully because it's not a health and safety standard that the street doesn't meet, but it's over and above. It's a beautification project. The applicant could request a concession from the requirement to implement that beautification project because it's costly and therefore makes development of the project infeasible. So these concessions, as they're most often used, are about reducing the costs. Alternatively, something that, this is a very simplistic example, but say there was a requirement for a certain color scheme or set of colors, earth tones, for example, and the applicant wanted to use different colors. It's unlikely they'd be able to make an argument that a different color scheme makes the project infeasible, so the local agency wouldn't necessarily be required to grant that concession. So I want to talk first, I'll get into a second about some of the other physical incentives, physical development incentives in a minute. So the applicant has proposed, well, let me back up. What's on the graph in front of everyone is straight out of the government code. The left-hand column is the percentage of very low income units, and so the applicant has applied to, requested the bonus on the lowest possible income groups, so they're restricting to the hardest to provide income categories. And they've proposed to provide 11% very low income units, that's the bottom row there, and in exchange for that would qualify for a 35% increase in density. I also want to say, and Lori will get into this more in a moment, these again are the minimum requirements. There's nothing from any of these regulations that prohibit the local agency from granting more density than this. These are just the minimum requirements. And so the applicant has also requested additional units, and so we'll get into a discussion of that a little bit in a little bit more detail. So back to concessions and how this all works. The applicant is entitled to 1, 2, or 3 concessions, depending on the level of affordability that they're restricting to. So as the number of concessions gets higher, so does the requirement for number and deeper levels of affordability. So the applicant in this project tonight has requested 2 concessions. So the threshold they have to meet is that middle bullet point. They have to provide at least 20% of units to lower income households, or at least 10% to very low income households. And that's what they've chosen to do. So now to talk a little bit about physical barriers. In addition to concessions, the number of concessions that the local agencies are required to give, they also must grant a waiver of any development standard that will have the effect of physically precluding the construction of a density bonus project. So here's where we get into more typical development standards that the Planning Commission might evaluate, things like height, setbacks, buffers in this example. So a waiver must be given for any of the standards that physically preclude the project. And so the applicant tonight, the project before you, is asking for a mix of concessions and waivers. They're asking for 2 concessions and 9 waivers. The Design Review Committee, when they reviewed the project, was asked to provide feedback on the design issues around the waivers. And tonight the Commission's being asked to make a recommendation on the use permit for the density bonus approval, which is inclusive of those waivers. So the Design Review Committee did not have any alternative suggestions or design solutions over what the applicant has, and they recommended the project more or less as it was coming to you tonight. They had some feedback on some of the other project features that we'll talk about. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lori McNabb. Lori's with M Group and has been helping us process the project.
Good evening. So I'm going to start talking about the Cotati Station apartment project. It's a 74-unit mixed-use development on Santara Way near the future Smart Station. The project is a series of 3-story buildings with like I said, 74 units, and on the slide there, I've shown you the mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, as well as just over 5,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor facing Santero Way. So I wanted to show you a brief slide of what the project that came before you in March of 2015. The project was 100% residential. It was over 2 project sites. And this project, as it was proposed, was recommended for denial both at the Design Review Committee and at the Planning Commission. So the project has changed. The project is now just over 1 development site. It's 74 units. And in addition to, I don't know if I like to point out, I don't know if I have a, there we go. So in addition to the project site, they are also building a community parking area. They're building Depot Way, which is the street that comes through with parking along Depot Way, and they are building a public park, which is envisioned by the Santero Way specific plan. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the project specifically. The project is in 1, 2, 3 buildings. The units will be accessed from the interior courtyard. There's also stair walk-ups from accessing from Santero Way. And you can come from the rear parking area and access the units as well. This building is going to have good interface with the future park. You can actually walk through these kind of breezeway areas and access the future park. In the earlier design, they had their bicycle parking back in these corners. The bicycle parking has now moved and is out here. It does 2 things. I think having the bicycle parking out here is safer for those who have to use these lockers, but also it shields the visual of the parking lot because you cannot have parking lots facing Santero Way in the specific plan. So they're nicely screened with this new design. And there's several conditions which are attached in your resolution, but one condition of the project is that it will have solar that will provide for 20% of the project's energy. 20%. Yeah. And I'll just go through some of the numbers. This, in the Santero Way specific plan, they can build 48 units by right. With the density bonus, they get up to 65 units, and they are asking for an additional 9 units. So this commission has the discretion on the additional 9. Vicki has gone through the concessions. They've asked for 2 with this project, and they are reducing the amount of ground floor commercial. The Santero Way specific plan requires that 30% of ground floor be commercial, and they are reducing that number to around 5%. That's one concession. The second concession is fenestration windows. Because this is a mixed use, it requires that 50% of the facade be windows, and because it's largely a residential project, they want to reduce that number, and the fenestration of the buildings ranges from 19 to 27%. So as Vicki has explained, the commission does not have much discretion over the concessions. It's just really if it's a fire, life, or safety issue, which these are not. So these are concessions asked for. And in addition to concessions, the density bonus allows them to ask for waivers, and they can ask for waivers if they believe that the density proposed is precluded by the development standards. And they've asked for 9 different waivers, and I've gone through those waivers in the staff report. You can see them here. And staff feels good about them, but there were 3 that we had further questions about. And in your packet, the sheets that were labeled E1, E2, et cetera, which are also behind you, are exhibits that we asked them to prepare for us so that we could understand why the waivers were needed. The first waiver was to building orientation. The Santero Way specific plan requires that the primary building frontage be parallel to Santero Way. So that would mean that these buildings, run this way. And in the earlier proposal, all 3 buildings were perpendicular to Santero Way. So we did not think that this needed to be a waiver. They showed us that if they put all 3 buildings parallel to Santero Way, the buildings didn't fit on the site, and then it put this large parking lot right on Santero Way, which is not allowed in the specific plan. And then the project you see before you now has 2 buildings which are parallel and 1 which is perpendicular, which we think is a good compromise. The second waiver that we wanted further information on was the Santero Way specific plan requires that 70% of the project frontage be at 0 setback. So 70% of the project they want right at the back of the sidewalk. And the developer has prepared this to show us that they cannot meet the standard, this gray area that kind of shows the setback. And that's because these are residential units that require outdoor patios in the zoning code. And to provide these outdoor patios, they have to push the building back to put those patios out there. And the third waiver that we wanted more information on was that they wanted to, or they're asking to reduce the private outdoor open space. So the zoning code requires that each unit have a 150 square foot patio or balcony. And they're saying that if they met that standard with all of their units, it would do 2 things. It would push the building further back from Santero Way in order to build these larger patios, and would also pinch this nice courtyard that they've provided for their residents. So with these exhibits and further understanding their need for them, staff has come to support all the waivers that they've requested. So parking. In the previous application, parking was a big issue and was denied in part because there was insufficient parking. The new project differs from the previous one because, one, the project is mixed use, and mixed use square footage has a higher ratio of parking required. They're building parking along Depot Way, and they're building a community parking area. And I have this to show you the parking areas that they're building. There will be 106 spaces on the private property. There's 19 spaces which are on Santero Way, and there's 13 spaces in front of the park that the way the code is written, they can count those towards their parking. In addition, they're also building this parking lot, I should call it, community parking lot, which is open to anybody in the Santero Way. And then along Depot Way, they are building 11 parking spaces. And this is also a condition of approval. This map shows these 11 parking spaces as perpendicular. And if they're perpendicular, this is a larger number. Staff is asking that these be angled because this is a public street, and that is the street standard requires it to be angled parking, and when it's angled, there are only 11 spaces there. The Design Review Committee saw this project on September 29th, and they recommended approval for the design of the project because they felt the design was appropriate for the Santero Way specific plan. They didn't have any issues with the requested waivers or concessions, and they gave some feedback regarding the park design. This is the schematic of the project that they reviewed and approved, and at that meeting, you have this packet, was attached to your packet. We did talk about materials and other design issues. So now I'm going to talk to you about the park. So Santero Way specific plan envisions a park, and it has language in what it wants this park to be. It wants it to have a multi-purpose lawn. It wants hard surface areas. It envisions a monument or public art and formal or monumental plantings and seating. So the applicant gave a very conceptual site plan for the park, and it's conceptual on purpose because staff was wanting feedback through the public review process. There are some constraints to the park. One is that there are 2 bioswales. The bioswales drain the development. I think it's building 1 of the development, and it also drains the public street. And staff has written 1 condition of approval asking that a sidewalk be built between the bioswale and the parking lot so it matches the condition on the other side. So when you get out of the car, you are not stepping in a bioswale, but you have a sidewalk to land on. But doing that will push the bioswale in, and the park will become a little smaller. So I wanted to talk to you about the recommendations the Design Review Committee had for the park. They felt that this design focuses too much on pedestrian connectivity, and the park should be more about open space and not kind of a wayfare for pedestrians. They felt that more shade is needed through trees or some sort of shade structure. They felt it was important that a water feature or other art be incorporated into the park so that there's some interest created in the area. And there was a comment that the park should be more plaza-like, not park-like. So in the discussions tonight, we wanted feedback from the commission on how you think the park should develop. So through final design review, they would come back with more formalized park plans. This project has been reviewed through CEQA, and it is exempt from CEQA through the residential infill exemption. The residential infill exemption has several standards in CEQA law, and I think it's A through K or A through N. It's several standards that staff has to go through, and we have found that this is exempt in part because of the density they're proposing, the amount of affordable units they're proposing, and the fact that it's within a half a mile of a transit stop. And if you wanted to talk further about the CEQA tonight, the staff member that prepared the CEQA document is here. Before I go to that slide, so in terms of public comment, there was 1 letter in your packet. Another letter came in this week, which is on the dais. Of the 2 letters, 1 was in support of tonight's project. The other was not in support because they felt the design and the density aren't appropriate. And the other item on the dais in front of you tonight was an added condition, adding a condition of approval to the list of conditions requiring, or this project requires a lot line adjustment, and we want to make sure that happens prior to building permits. It's just formalizing that. And with that, staff recommends that this commission recommend to the City Council approval of both preliminary design review and a use permit for density bonus for the concessions and waivers. And we are happy to answer questions.
All right. Other questions from commissioners for staff?
None at this time.
Vice Chair O'Nines.
Regarding parking, in the packet, it looks like Santero Way is to be widened. Is that not correct for fire?
Right.
And you're going to lose 11 parking slots from that.
Yes.
Now, did you use that minus 11 in your calculations?
Yes, the parking chart that's in the staff report shows the correct number of spaces that have been recaptured from the parking that's removed on Santero Way down in front of the park. And then there are 11 parking spaces added here, but the total, yes, the numbers are correct in the table.
I do just want to expand on that a little bit, that those parking spaces that are being removed in front of the park are not full use spaces. They're restricted and there's no parking there overnight. That has to do with the fire district's dis-ease with the narrowness of the road. And so even though we're recouping 11 on Depot Way and the number is equivalent, there will be expanded use of those spaces. You can park there all night with the new ones.
Any more questions for staff? Commissioner Hancock.
I've got a slightly different question on here, so I don't know if it's the role of the Planning Commission to ask about this or comment on it, but there's a national discussion on high-speed internet, and I'm just wondering, is there anything in the Cotati Code that is precluding in the future, wiring all these apartments, the multifamily aspect, wiring them easily for high-speed internet?
No, there is not. The city engineer and I have spoken about getting to the site and on the site itself, and he feels that the utility could provide whatever conduit size and type is needed for a high-speed internet. And from the building, from the perspective of the building construction, no, it could just be built into their building plans. We don't inspect it, but we'd look for, just to make sure it's installed safely, not cross-wired with electrical or something like that. So the short answer is no, there's nothing that would preclude it.
Thank you.
Anything more? Okay, I'll open this up to public comment, and so this is the time when any member of the public is invited to step to the podiums, state your name and address for the record if you can, and comment on this proposal, and this is the chance for the applicant to address the commission as well. Public comment is open. Come on up.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Helen Bradley. I live at 6323 Santero Way, and this is becoming a bit of a habit of mine to come here and talk to you about the parking, because it's not getting any better and it's getting worse. I know that this is sort of medium to high density, but medium to high density doesn't mean less cars. In fact, it means more cars. And if you guys have ever been down Santero Way at this time of night, it is a disaster already. Your little precious park has, when I left here this evening, over 10 vehicles already on it. The whole of Santero Way is like, there's not a park there at this time of night. And by tomorrow morning, that park and all the way back to practically to your depot way is full of cars already. And this is before you have put another 70 odd units on it. Now, I just did a count of bedrooms. There's 6 one-bedrooms, there's 41 two-bedrooms, that's 82. There's 27 three-bedrooms, that's another 81 bedrooms. If you total that up, that's 169 bedrooms. Now, if we're being pragmatic, this is not families living in these houses. This is so close to SSU that most of these places are rented. It's a very high rental population in those, unusually high for that kind of development, and it's high because they're SSU students. And SSU students, they put one person in a bedroom, they put 2 people in a bedroom. There's some really nice bedrooms there that are couples. So that means that a 4-bedroom apartment or 4-bedroom townhouse in Santero Way is likely having anything between 4 and 6 people in it. They go to SSU, they do not ride bicycles. You look along East Guttati Avenue at SSU time in the mornings and you see very few bicycles. These guys do not ride bikes. They also don't take the train because firstly the train's not there and it's a furphy to try and insinuate that that train and that transit situation is going to improve the situation. It's not. They're driving to SSU, they're having cars, and right now those 4-bedroom apartments have 2 car spaces. If there are 6 people in there, and let's be kind, let's say they only have 4 cars, that's still 2 extra cars on the road. There is nowhere where you can park them. You also can't put trucks in there. So if you've got one of those things that's like relatively high, they don't fit. They physically don't fit. So a lot of people just actually can't physically park in there, even if there was a space, because their cars don't fit. You can't take the train to the supermarket. The train doesn't go to the cinema. It doesn't go to the kind of places that people travel to, except occasionally the people who go to work. And there's no proof at this stage that the train is actually going to take commuters to the city. And the people who are living there aren't commuting to the city, they're going to SSU or they're living locally. So it's a furphy to suggest that because we're so close to a transit situation, a transit stop, that this is in actual fact going to help the parking situation. The parking is dire now. It's going to be super dire. And you're going to have people parking all the way up East Guttati Avenue. I strongly suggest that you put in that parallel parking. If you did parallel parking instead of that angle parking, you would buy back some more spaces. But the density of this property and the number of rooms that you're adding You're just adding a car problem to an existing car problem. And I really encourage you to have a look at it because it is really, really bad. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Oh, sorry, I'm going to talk about
We got it. Thanks. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Sky Matula. I live at 6305 Santero Way. I've been there since the beginning of the Santero project and been to several of these meetings. I would agree as well that parking is a huge disaster there. It is about 70% currently rented to students, and there are between usually 4 and 8 students in each unit, along with their significant others that spend the night as well. So we're looking at 6 to 10, 12 cars per unit per night on this street already without this development being added, with 74 units that are going to be 1 bedroom to 3 bedroom, I believe. A 1 bedroom is going to have at least 2 cars. The 2 bedroom, at least 2 to 4 cars, etc. So adding 181 parking spaces, which is what I added up to, is nowhere near enough for the added 74 units. And like Helen was saying, the entire park area is currently a parking lot for what is already being used. People are parking on the east side of Santero Way already at night, risking getting tickets. The police don't ticket every night. They ticket on occasion. So it's kind of, most of the time you won't get a ticket, but the east side of the street is parking pretty much every night. There is not enough parking. The request of the developer to have another 11 or 15 units or something more than what the plan requires them is, I really like the plan, but it's not feasible for parking. So I would recommend that you do not allow them to go above and beyond what is already allowed. And then I'm going to switch gears because of time. I really like the design of the project. I'd love to see something kind of like it come into building. Limit the number of units, though, and add parking. And I would really like to have the change, and I think this goes back to design, though, of having gable rooftops rather than the just vertical urban looking, which I don't think fits the Cotati community. It looks very urban and city-like, and I think that for Santero Way, gable roofs would look a lot nicer and more residential for that community itself. Thank you.
Thanks. Looks like it's up to you.
Good evening. My name is Neil Rudolph. I am one of the members of the development team. It has been 18 months since we've seen you last. If someone had told me 18 months ago that I would spend that time frame becoming expert on density bonus, density in general, parking, and spend quite a bit of time both physically here in meetings with Lori and with Vicki, I would have said, 18 months, are you serious? But it has been worth it. The project is much, much better than what you saw before, and much of that is due to the hard work by these two over here. Vicki and Lori have spent an immense amount of time educating us, getting us up to speed on certain things. We spent quite a bit of time and effort getting information to them. It has been a back and forth process at least twice a week in this 18-month time frame to get to this point. And I want to thank them both. I also wanted to point out that we knew from the very beginning parking would be an issue, and we thought we came up with a pretty imaginative solution by offering to build not only parking along Depot Way. If we could go, Lori, if we could go back to that picture for a moment. Yeah, the parking picture. Thank you very much. Yeah, super.
Maybe the one with the numbers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cloudy one. Yeah, that's it. Parking along Depot Way, which is the 11 spots, and then the off-street parking, which we offered to build for the city on that little stub piece that they had. We actually went into the marketplace and purchased the park to complete the entire project. And we do have, we believe, 3 ways of looking at some of these parking issues. The first, that both Sky and Helen touched on, is driven obviously by the folks that live there. We have, in our own group, been on the Homeowners Association for the 70 townhouses, the 14 lofts, since the project first came up. We are the original developers. We are the original owners. We've been at this for 15 years. Several homes, townhouses in that area have garages that are not being used for parking. So that's been an issue at the Homeowners Association level for all 15 years. Also, we do feel that there is ways to maximize, get us more parking, speaking to Helen's point, and that would be to take the 19 slots on the street there and the 13 slots on the street is in that sort of beige-ish tone, and go from angled parking to perpendicular parking. If we did that, we pick up 17 more spots, which is not insignificant. Now, at design review and at the staff level, they have pointed out in both cases that angled parking is the Cotati standard, and we get that. And if that's what you want us to build, we'll build it. But if the neighborhood would like to see more parking, that is a rather simple solution. I can't remember if we drew something up for you on that or not. Okay. Okay. So we might actually have a screen on this that we developed with the staff. There's no clouds. Okay. So as you can see, it changes from this angled to perpendicular. And when you do the math on the entire streetscape, you'll end up with 17 more spots. It also ensures that folks who want to park along Santero Way don't have to make a 135-degree turn or drive down to the end of the street where the bulb out is, spin around and come back. Most of us are lazy. I've tried this myself right over here. Today, when Guy drove instead of me, he actually drove through that little parking lot and parked on the angle rather beautifully, but his car is much nicer than mine. Anyhow, I think that we have spent a lot of time and effort going through the math of the parking. We have met all the requirements of the city with respect to the amount of parking we supply. We feel we've gone the extra mile in offering to put additional parking both on Santero Way and on the city's property. I also would point out that they are correct, both Helen and Sky are correct. There are cars parked on the grass. That's nowhere near what the actual parking lot's going to look like, and nor is it nowhere near the number of spots. And there is no question in my mind that if we can offer more by going to perpendicular, that would be a good idea for the neighborhood. Is there any other questions I should spend time on?
Do commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Horowitz.
I'm going to call you Neil because
Neil's perfect.
I've met you so many times. You don't want to answer this now, but there's been an allegation made by letter that design review, planning department has impeded your work. I was impressed when you said you spent 18 months, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. You know, you're going to complain about how this has worked. But at some time, and I don't want it to be now, because right now we're in a decision-making process, and you don't want to skew that. But I would like you to let us know if you felt that this has been an impediment. Because we're trying to work with you. You know, each of us are spending many hours studying these packets, trying to assimilate what we're being given.
I think I can answer the question now, because I was prepped for it. We heard that such a letter would be prepared. We started on the wrong foot. We attempted to hit the ball out of the court, so to speak, in our first development scenario. We did not fully understand not only all of the specifics of the Santero Way specific plan, we also did not fully understand all of the issues with respect to building a project on Santero Way, specifically tied into the train. We just started from 60,000 feet and said, oh, there's a train, then you're going to want apartments, and you're going to want a lot of apartments. Why don't we just draw something up and see how that goes? That was our error, and we probably spent 3 or 4 months rebuilding our relationship with the city, and this is from Damien Obid all the way down, where we had to rethink how we were approaching this. The density bonus law and the opportunity to, in essence, develop the north side focused on how to make this really work was a conclusion we came to in concert with the city. That ate up probably another 2 or 3 months. So now we're 6 months into it. We're still really nowhere with respect to, do we have an application that will go and be analyzed fully by Lori and Vicki? So no, it's been 18 months, but it's time well spent. We have a better project. We have not been impeded.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that's very gracious of you. Also, I'd like to mention, to me, the whole thing hinges on parking. I've attended the HOA. I've been there. I know we have another person that wants to speak. And the HOA and Helen and Sky are, you know, everyone that I've spoken to in that scenario, it's all about the parking.
Yeah.
And I think what you proposed, I'm going to go forward and say I think it's proper and right that we do that.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions for the applicant before I go on to the next speaker?
Yes.
Commissioner Hancock.
Thank you very much for the very big overview on this. And I just want to look down in the role of Planning Commission to people moving into these apartments and to things changing in the future for high-speed internet. Because this is a core site, and it's a national discussion, it's not just something here. So do you feel that when you do these apartments, there's going to be any limitation to being able to pull fibers in there, or at a later stage? I'm not asking that anything happens now.
No. That's fine.
Or DSL, VDSL that might just, because it's a multifamily, there's going to be common areas, and unless that's actually thought about in advance, not necessarily paid for, but maybe some minor pipe upgrades or something. So just an open-ended question, do you feel that this would be able to take high-speed internet at a later stage?
It will absolutely be able to take high-speed internet, and the reason for that is our architectural partner, Guy Chambers, and myself, I'm sort of the financial side of it. We've both moved into new homes in the last couple of years, and we are internet demanders. We demand a lot of broadband, a lot of power. And so it's really all about building enough conduit for this Cat6 kind of fiber. It'll be there. Now the question becomes, will the person renting the apartment want to pay for the faster modem or just take what Comcast or AT&T gives them? That's something we can't define, but we can define that there'll be enough glass in the conduit. Yes.
Okay, that's just the question. They can make the decision then. They'll have the ability to make it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anything more for the applicant? Okay. Thank you. So I'll let the next speaker come on up.
My name is Amy Kirsch. I live at 850 East Cotati Avenue, and I have to say I came here on the fly because I found the letter. I am really concerned about parking as well. I hate to be a broken record, but realistically, in my small condo complex where I live, some of the residents have 5 cars. They have 2 parking spaces each. I have to agree with this lovely person and what she said. And I also noticed that when the trains that are being tested right now because I live like a block from the car wash there. As the gates go down, I was trying to get out of my parking lot, and I couldn't get out for about 8 minutes. And that was a long time because I am self-employed and have to get places in a certain time frame, and I was like, wow. So I have to run my life around the hour of the train because the parking was backed up to Oliver's when the gates went down, and that's a good 2.5 blocks down from me. So there's that concern about density on East Cotati Avenue when our town really doesn't have a lot of escape routes. It's kind of like East Cotati Avenue. And in Roner Park, a lot of the streets are courts. And so I just couldn't help but notice that that was a shocking, and I supported the train, and now I'm looking at, wow, that's really intense. And I just think realistically that I hope you folks look at not just the plan. I was on the board at my condo for like 10 years as a volunteer. I respect trying to make things work and making plans that work, but I think realistically the parking is a huge issue, and I don't think it's going to go away, and I don't think there's enough parking spaces in this new plan. I think it's very realistic. The college kids come, there are 4. Some of the units, there are 3 bedrooms, sometimes there are 6 kids living in there, and they all have cars. So that, not to belabor the point, but that's a big concern of mine, and I really think it's not being looked at realistically. So thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ernst, and I live at 6929 Santero Way. And I agree with Helen and Sky about the parking situation. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, people are parking all over the place on Santero Way, all the way down into the cul-de-sac, and sometimes they even park on the private lot behind my house, and they have to be like, removed. But another thing I wanted to say too, as a homeowner there at on Santero Way, is that I think that you guys should stick to the specific plan. I mean, I think that 74 units is an awful lot of units to put on that street, and it's so narrow as it is. I mean, the fire trucks can barely even come down that road, and I can't imagine that they'd be able to do so with 74 more units. I mean, you could probably just add times 4, and that's about how many more people you would have with cars on Santero Way. And I don't want to just make it about the parking either. I think that I know that when I purchased my home there, I've lived there for 11 years, I was told that there would be specific things there, like maybe some more condos and some retail spaces, but not a bunch more apartments. And I just think that it's not right for Santero Way, and I would really like you guys to have them reconsider. I mean, maybe the 48, but even that is probably too much. But I just wanted to let you know how I feel. Thank you.
Thanks. Any more members of the public which wish to speak? All right, I'm going to close public comment. And let's see, staff, did you have any questions that you heard come up that you wanted to address?
Not questions necessarily, but there were some things that we probably could have expanded upon a little bit more in our presentation, but I can either mention those, or I think there are things that the commission is already probably going to chat about. So
Well, why don't you go ahead and bring up what you noticed, because they might short-circuit some of our questions.
Okay. I'm sorry, Carrie, one more time. Could we go to the PowerPoint? I'll use this parking diagram again because it's just a good, I'll use part of the parking diagram. It's a good site plan to use, and I just want to point out Depot Way which is really this curved street here the curved street up in the upper left corner of the site plan. That extension is for fire purposes. So that extension was a requirement. The extension, it's really through the existing Sonoma County Transit parking lot. That extension was required for fire access. So for the fire department, that is a secondary means of egress, whether that's for fire trucks or for evacuation purposes, depends on how they're fighting the fire. But the widening of Santero Way in front of the park and the secondary means of access were both to address the public safety concerns of having a long cul-de-sac with so many units on it. And I also want to point out that the applicant did request or had designed perpendicular parking in front of their project, and staff did ask them to change it to angled parking so that it met one of the standards. There are two standards that are allowable in the Santero Way specific plan. One is angled parking and one is parallel. So out there right now is parallel parking. And staff was the one that requested the angled parking. So you would, just by my calculations, gain another 22 spaces if we did perpendicular. So that's, as the applicant said, 17 down the length of Santero Way and an additional 5 up on Depot Way. So you would get that many more spaces if you went to perpendicular, which the commission has the authority to do. And then just finally, staff has definitely known that park, I think everybody knows, probably not as intensely as residents do, but we're aware of the parking problem out there, and I think the commission knows from the last time that the project has a reduced parking standard because of the idea that it was transit proximate and it was a plan of mixed use. And so it does have a very low parking ratio required. The applicant has met that requirement, and so many of the meeting discussions that the applicant referred to earlier was us trying to problem solve about how to provide more parking in the area that could alleviate some of the existing issues. And we have a condition of approval in the attached conditions right now to the resolution that requires the project to have an on-site manager. And part of the reason for the on-site manager was to have a representative to the HOAs, the HOA or HOAs that are also on the street, and for purposes of parking management, as well as parking management on site. And so what this project is going to be a rental project, so the owner-operator has much more control over how the parking supply is managed, at least on their own property. So those are the safeguards that we put into place in cooperation with the applicant and as conditions of approval to try and mitigate what is a parking issue on the street. So did you have any other comments? So that was all I had for now.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions of staff about anything that came up in that discussion? Commissioner Hancock?
So assume from this, the angle to parallel, that there would be space for, or the angle to sticking out, that there would be space on the road for that. That would still...
I think we would prefer to have the applicant's engineer speak to that or architect speak to that. The site plan has changed a number of times since we last calculated, so I'd just like verification from them.
Well, maybe I can ask the other questions as well on here. So the train station parking, I think this has come up before. Is there a usage which could be shared overnight with that? So with the parking in the train station area, is that possible to have that as a multi-use?
The parking that is built out there right now belongs to Sonoma County Transit. And so if they were open to having any kind of any kind of shared use would require their approval and assistance in managing it because it's their parking.
And what would be the process from Cotati to ask for that? Or would that be the homeowners have to do that? Or how would that be originated?
I think the request would appropriately come from the city engineer or the city manager.
And then I suppose also on that, other places do a permit parking if there's too many cars in the area, especially in this situation. I mean, has that come up for discussion at all with the homeowners, or how does that happen in Cotati? I don't think there is anywhere like that in Cotati right now, but...
No, unless some HOAs are doing it, unless some neighborhoods are doing it on their own, I'm not aware of any that are in the city right now either. We have requested, as part of the permitting process, that they provide us with a parking management plan for their own property. So we've left it open as to whether that's a permit system or how they feel best to manage it on their own property. The issue of permitting the street parking gets a little more complicated because the first projects were approved without a requirement for a permit system. So it would be a community effort that the residents out there were amenable to. There's no way for us to require them to have a permit system. So that's been kind of the challenge, is there's an existing problem that we're at a minimum trying not to exacerbate, but yeah, it's
so the
tough issue.
homeowners would have to request that. The homeowner association would have to put it forward to request it.
They would at least have to be amenable to it. The city could certainly initiate the discussions. The other issue, of course, is who polices it. And the police department, for one, isn't staffed to do kind of parking management. So there's going to be a cost associated with the monitoring of the permit system.
Thank you. So just that question on the spacing at some point.
Yeah, so hold that. Let me see if other questions for the applicant come up, and then I'll reopen public comment for all those questions. Commissioner Moore.
I have a couple questions. The commercial has gone down to 5.6. There's nothing we can do about that. That's just going to be one of the concessions that we have to put into the project?
That's right. That is one of the concessions that we don't have discretion over. Yes.
Okay, and another point was the kind of piggyback what Neil was saying about the parking and parking permits. I know the city of Santa Rosa does that around the JC, that they have certain parking and that you have to have a permit around that area. So, I mean, just if we were going to do some program like that, maybe that would be a good resource, because I know many years going to the JC that you can't park in certain areas because you have to have a permit to park there. The only comment I have, and it's really not a question, is why only 20% solar? And the park I read is a private park, not a public park. Can you expand on that?
It's actually a public park. The applicant, some ownership entity of the applicants will maintain ownership of it, but will have full public access.
Okay. And how about all the amenities in the park? Will that be maintained by the owner?
Yes, be maintained by the owner.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
More questions for staff? Or anything that you want the applicant to address when I reopen?
The only thing I think that came up in a letter from a community member and then tonight was just like about the flat roof. So maybe we could just like, and that hasn't really been clarified tonight, so maybe we can just address that or have the applicant address that.
Why the switch to a flat roof from the gable that's in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and certainly the applicant can probably explain it better than I can, but once you get the density bonus added to it and you get the resulting height from the density bonus units, if you put a gabled roof on it, it really begins to look way out of proportion. The gabled roofs were, it's a style that I personally like a lot, but when you start putting it on a 3-story building, it starts to look kind of Disney-like, and we were also interested in getting solar on it, and so that becomes a little more problematic on the gabled roofs as well. I'm sure there are other design reasons that the applicant may want to speak up, may want to address, and as Lori pointed out, the DRC actually liked the style of the architecture. They felt it was appropriate for the higher density. The applicants has used building articulation in the building facades and color to sort of break up a mass that a 3-story box might present. So they liked the combination of those to try and mediate the style differences.
All right, before I open it back up, I want to raise the issue of the inclusionary, or the density bonus calculations. And so 5 out of 48 is not 11%. That's 10.4%, and that's not enough to trigger the 35% density bonus. I read through that code section carefully before I came to the meeting. I really believe the required very low dedication is 6 units to get a 35% density bonus. So whatever we present tonight, I will ask that we include a provision that there be a legal opinion from the city attorney prior to that recommendation going to city council, because I think that it's a misreading of the law to say that 5 units triggers a 35% density bonus. So given that the applicant is now an expert on density bonus laws, if you wish to address that, also do that. So I'm going to reopen public comment in order to allow the applicant to speak again, both about the space for perpendicular parking, if you want to address the question of move to flat roofs, and anything you want to say about the density bonus calculation. And then other members of the public are welcome to speak at this point.
I'd like to address about the solar.
Oh, and the solar, why is the 20% the number? Great. So back to public comment.
And maybe while the applicant's coming up, I'll let them also add anything they want on solar, but we applied 20% because that is the benchmark that's in the upcoming climate action plan. So we were anticipating that the action plan would be in place prior to the permitting of the project. So we used the goals from the climate action plan.
And that's 20% of electricity, or you said 20% of energy usage?
It's written as energy usage.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
No problem. David Brown. I'm with Adobe Associates, civil engineer for the project. And actually, when you have perpendicular parking, that's much more efficient use of space, and that's what allows you to have actually greater number of parking spaces. As well as, and if you look at some of the exhibits that were prepared that shows the perpendicular parking, there's actually a little bit more landscaping in some of the street corners because you're coming in perpendicular rather than at an angle. So those landscape areas actually get a little bit larger as well.
I think we get the width. The question, we get the packing them in side by side closer. The question was about, does the street need to be wider to accommodate the turning radius and things like that?
No, the street's already being widened in order to meet the fire department's requirements of 26-foot clear.
Okay.
And so, no, it doesn't need to become wider.
Okay, thanks. And then, is there anybody who wants to speak about the flat roof choice, flat roof versus gable?
The flat roof idea was from a couple of different sources. One was the whole notion that we want to try and put mechanical units up there and use parapets to screen that. The solar panels, I think, are nicely screened up there. I'm not particularly a fan of solar panels sitting on sloping roofs. They're all exposed. If we can find other creative ways to avoid that, I think so much the better. The second part of it was just a whole stylistic notion about what these buildings might or might not look like. One of the things that we were working very, very hard at trying to do was to bring more of a residential townhouse kind of look to the project. If you can imagine the length of Building 2, which is the one that runs parallel to Santero Way, monolithic color. It's all within, a reasonable guideline. We certainly see it and experience that. As an architect, I wasn't particularly excited about that sort of notion. So we went in the direction of trying to come up with a project that had a series of more vertical elements and a vertical rhythm to it. At the top of those, as you call it, flat roofs, we call those parapets. And we've put cornices up there to begin to develop a vocabulary and some articulation as opposed to just simply a flat roof, a warehouse kind of look that you see in industrial parks. There's a lot more going on here architecturally, and in my experience as an architect, it's a very, very handsome approach to it. You get a lot of, in addition to the verticality, we've also worked really hard to try and pull the facades in and out a little bit so that there are places for planting, that it's not just a simple, wallpapered kind of elevation that pedestrians on the street are exposed to. The reality of it is you really only see those flat roofs for the most part from way down the street. And what we were working really hard to try and do was get something that was much more pedestrian friendly, that you really, if you think about it, if you stand next to a gable end building and you look up, you see the horizontal line of the gutter. And it's effectively a flat roof. It could be a flat roof, it could be gabled, whatever. And I think from a pedestrian scale, working very, very hard to try and get this rhythm and articulation moving down the street is a much more, human scale and much more sensitive approach to an architectural style. So that was what led us to this decision for the flat roofs.
Can I ask you one more question before you go? I should have raised it before. The entrances in, for instance, Building 2 are off the courtyard, the main first floor entrances, is that right?
Well, we have in Building 2, in all of the buildings, you can actually access them along the long sides. You can actually enter mid-building in Buildings 1, 2, and 3. You can do it twice in Building 1. You can do it once in at least Building 2 and once in Building 3. And what we were trying to do was we were trying to make it so that people that are living in this, I think the last time I was here I explained the fact that I personally am not a big fan of long corridors in apartment buildings, that I think you develop much more community when you have people that are moving up and down the same stairway and you're coming in and out of the entrance, that sort of stuff. And what we did was we worked really hard to try and make it so that people that are up on the third floor can very easily access that open space that sits between Buildings 1 and 2. And you can also enter into that courtyard as a resident, as a public person coming in off of Santero Way. You can come around the ends of the building. So I think one of the things that we've seen in, I don't know if the pedestrian circulation diagram is one of the exhibits.
Yeah.
They're very permeable buildings at the ground floor, and that was purposefully done to make it much more inviting, much more engaging for people coming and going in and out of this complex.
Great, thanks. Okay.
Math meets law in negotiation. 11% times 48. I get 5.28.
Right.
Very hard to build a 0.28 of a unit.
Right.
So we go to the lawyers. The lawyers say math meets negotiation, meets the law. They talk a lot about rounding. I don't think I'd round up from 0.28. I'd like to round down, but I'm the developer.
Right.
So then we fall back to negotiation. When we go for the discussion of the density bonus and the city's ability to then add units to get us to 74. So we started at 48, we add the 35%, and then there's 9 additional units.
Right.
All of those units are affordable. I sort of think the city did pretty well on the 0.28. But that doesn't mean that we didn't spend an immense amount of time and effort to make sure that we were as fair as possible. So when we took the entire 14 units of affordable housing, which is almost 19%, the headline number of 19% is greater than the Cotati city requirement of 15, so we thought that was a step in the right direction. We also thought that when we took the mix and went into a 3-variable discussion of how it should be broken out, many developers would have said, well, all 5 of the very low units have to be the 1-bedrooms. We didn't do that. We spread those 5 and all of the affordables by category across 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms based on the total number of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms in the entire project so that we were as fair as possible. I'm willing to fall back to both lawyers, both the City of Cotati's lawyer and our land use lawyer, again, on the 2.8, but I think we've done it correctly.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have the question of solar?
Sure. Do you want to address that?
The 20%?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious to see, it was only 20%. I mean,
Well, that's what the new code is calling for. And by the way, that's not a code that's in place today. That's a code that's going to be in place by the time we pull the permit.
okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So you're just doing what's required?
No.
Just 20%?
We're doing what's going to be required in the future.
Okay.
If we wanted to do what's required today, it could be a smaller number, but we're open to doing what's right.
Thanks. Any other members of the public wish to speak? All right. Close this public comment. Commission discussion.
Can there be a number of sections? Because one of the ones is parks that we've not really talked about. And then the rest, or how would we like to structure it?
If you'd like to talk about the park first, we can do that first.
Okay.
Okay. Well, looking at the park, I mean, and trying that out on a few other people, I mean, having some visual interest, I think, is what really works, as well as the ability to move through it. So not just having it as a grassy area, I guess, is what my sort of input would be, and having a piece of art maybe, and I'm thinking of Cotati's low water park really, and the way it does it, that there's a visual corridor in the park to the art at one end. So that's where there's the log, and there's a picture on the log in the low water park. But just having something that is visually interesting, as well as a way of walking through it. And the visually interesting would also be, all year greenery, plants. So something of that nature is what I would think for the park. So something along the kind of lines that's being proposed, but art form and a visual corridor to that art.
Anybody else have anything to say about the park?
So I'm just curious, Neil, so you wouldn't have the paths crisscross, you would have more of an open space in the middle?
No, have the paths cross through, but within the plants, with the way that the plants are placed, have it so that there's a visual internal way that the eyes get sort of guided to an art form, maybe on the northern side, on the narrow side, where you could have an art. And if you go to the Cotati Low Water Park, right now. It has that, which is quite nice and impressive, that there's an internal, even though you've got very busy traffic around it, there's an internal sort of view, if you like, along the park, which you only really notice once you get into it. So something that's visually interesting, has the plants in there. I think the swale on the east side can have plants in it, so the swale could almost be invisible in a way to anybody who's there, but the walkway through the park as well.
Okay. Anything else about the park? I may open up another public comment period in a while, but I can't do it every commissioner comment, so let me hold for a while. Anything else about the park? Personally, I'm inclined to leave that design discussion to design review and not redo it here. I'm worried about having too many designers trying to design.
It's just we were asked for our opinion.
Well, that's true. We can give input to design review, so that would be great to note down for when they come back for final design review. That's great.
This is the first time. This is the first time in my experience that design review has really passed on an issue. They've literally said, Planning Commission, you decide, or we say, City.
No, I don't think they said that. It will come back for final design review later to the design review committee, and so this is an opportunity for us to give them feedback for when they see this again with the final design. Okay. They already gave the applicant some feedback, but it's our chance to give more. Okay. So if you have any, now's the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also add that what we talked about at design review had also to do, and one of the reasons they wanted input from you all and from the public at a second meeting was really how should the park be programmed. That's why they got a little bit into the discussion of hardscape versus greenscape, was really about the other park has the tot lot and it has turf for playing. This one's closer to where folks are getting on and off the train and might be inclined to wait for the train. So is it park or is it plaza? Is it so it sort of runs the gamut from standing and contemplating life to playing basketball. So those are the kinds of uses that we were interested in getting some additional feedback on. Thank you.
Jamie, do you want to?
Sorry, I was laughing at the contemplating life versus basketball decision. No, I think, and what I heard from the applicant is I think they're trying to really develop a sense of community. So when I saw it, I was really envisioning more of a plaza-like atmosphere myself, especially because I've been over there and I've seen more of the play yard. So I wasn't necessarily feeling like there was a need for an additional space for that, just more of developing that sense of community.
I look at it more as the plaza downtown.
Yeah,
like
a gathering space.
Where we have the sidewalks around, and then there's more open space in the middle where it's just more of a park where you can just meander and sit, and there's trees and
contemplate life.
Right. All right. Any more comments about the park? Can we move on to parking?
Let's do it.
Comments about parking?
I think there's issues definitely about parking, and even though I support angled parking downtown, I've been up in Windsor a lot lately, and they have parking where you have to back in, and that's a challenge if you're a little spatially challenged like me. I think it works, but I think with the parking out there, I'm actually willing to do the perpendicular parking just because of the issues that have gone on, and especially with Santero Way townhouses out there, that I think that's more of a plausible. I know visually it probably isn't the best, but I think sometimes you have to, go with what's going to be practical. I know that there's been parking issues out there for years. But I do also encourage the on-site property managers to be more, especially with this new project coming, to be more proactive with, a parking solution, whether it be permits or whether it be just managing the parking better for the tenants. I know we lived in a townhouse in Cotati, and they were very strict about our parking and who parked and where we got to park. And there was very limited parking there. So I think a fresh start would be good to get more parking out there and be more proactive.
Could I ask, what was the design review committee recommendation on parallel versus perpendicular, and was there a strong sense there, or did they talk about it?
I'll let Lori add to it if she remembers it differently, but there was very little discussion about it.
Okay.
The issue did not come up parallel or angled versus perpendicular. The applicant saw it as an issue because of the public that came out to the design review committee meeting, and between the DRC and this meeting, they prepared those two exhibits that we put at the end of tonight's presentation in case the issue came up again, so we could talk about it.
Great, thanks. Any more about parking?
I feel like parking with a lot of our projects comes up like as an issue. So I look at this as like an actual opportunity to do something about it, like where we have like another chance to get the parking right for these community members. So I'm really happy to try the perpendicular parking to see if that gives them any peace in their neighborhoods. Because I've been at parking wars too, where I try to beat someone around, go the other way in my neighborhood to get that last parking spot at that curb. So I live it, I know it, and I think if we can ease any of that stress when you're getting home at the end of the day, that would be really helpful.
Great.
I agree with the perpendicular. It's right at the edge of the entrance area, so it's going to be a little bit more, well, I guess it's a benefit for moving in to be able to go into it directly. I mean, I see people who've done reverse in parking or backing in parking, the vehicles that they've had have actually had a side radar of some sort, because I said, how did you do that? And so, I mean, that might be something that happens in the future where there's more or a request maybe of some sort to do the backing in, because the vehicles have more sense of where the space is and how to get in there. But right now, the perpendicular with the front end parking, I think I would be fine with. I mean, I do feel for people with all the different vehicles coming in. I have been around that area, but I tend to cycle around that area and cycle around the back and just see what the garages are and how much of it's open. Maybe a suggestion for the future that when the new projects come up at the back, is there a way of doing the parking where the garage spaces perhaps are more in a common area, so that they have to be used for parking, that they can't be used for storage? Because I think the big issue is that those internal bottom level garages can become storage, and people just sit out on the road. So how you can balance that up in the design, but that would be for further down for the next time round on this. So I think perpendicular will give a little bit of space now, and I think it's going to be a challenge. But yeah.
Any more? I agree. I think on a relatively low-traffic residential road, that perpendicular parking is worth a try. I wouldn't want to try it on Old Red right downtown, so happy to try it here. And the 22 parking spaces is pretty significant. So I think the proposal meets the code requirements for parking they're providing, and with this change, it would exceed it pretty substantially, plus the public parking lot to try to address the existing problem somewhat. So I very much appreciate the changes to the project compared to when we saw it 18 months ago with regard to parking. So general comments or other areas you want to talk about? Ready to go?
I'll make some comments that I like the project. I mean, I like the discussion on the facade being stepped. So certainly the diagrams that are up here kind of show that stepping. I like a little bit of the at least the visual access to the buildings and how people are going to move through them. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the discussion about having more low-cost housing. I mean, this is a question that comes up for this committee quite a bit, this commission, and for the city. So it's a real challenging time for that, and I don't know if there's any easy answers, but I like the project, and I appreciate all the work that's been done on it. And
Commissioner Brady.
I'm happy to see that we're here today again to discuss this project. I was a little disappointed too to see that we're down to like 5.6%. Is that what it was on commercial? Because I know when we talked about it like 18 months ago, the community members that came out then were like really looking forward to the retailers that they were hoping were to come in, or some more business opportunities there for them. So I think that's probably my only like lingering disappointment. But other than that, I think, it has been a bit of a bumpy ride for us, but I think that just means it's like a time for growth for our community. With Smart Train, I think we're all still learning, so I'm excited to see where it goes and where this project will go for all of us.
I just hope that the neighbors are somewhat happy with more parking out there. I feel the same as Jamie, that I'm disappointed with the lack of commercial, but the state outrules local jurisdictions, so there's really nothing we can do.
All right, and I'm generally fine with the project. I like it a lot better than 18 months ago. Parking's great. The density and the extra 9 units is a big ask, and I feel like it's not getting enough attention here. And that's an extra 15%. We're essentially talking about a 50% density bonus instead of a 35% or 32.5%, depending on whose math you like, that the state requires. And so I appreciate that all 9 of those are proposed to be deeded affordable. The moderate income deeding for units of this type is unlikely to actually make much of a financial difference for the developer. These will primarily all be moderate income affordable. I mean, that's one advantage of a project like this, is we're not just the deeded units, but the whole project is affordable at some level, which we really need. So I appreciate that aspect of it. The 9-unit ask on top of what I think is a generous to the developer reading of the density bonus requirements is it just makes me feel like it's and then 6 of those 9 units being at moderate rather than the half and half that the city code requires. The third, very low, moderate. So. I would like to ask that the Commission recommend that the city attorney give an opinion on both what that requirement really is to get the 35% density bonus. Is it a floor of 11, or is it how you put that? I mean, I completely agree that 5 is, okay, now I'm getting my math mixed up. So depending on which number you calculate, we're either at 10.4%, which is closer to 10%, which gives you a 32.5% density bonus, or we're at 5.28 units, which is closer to 5 units, and 11%. So I just want to know a legal opinion about that. The other issue that I think would require 6 very low units is that the applicant is requesting 2 concessions, and that requires 10% of the units other than those given by the density bonus be at the very low level. We have 48 plus 9, we have 57 units in addition to the 17 given by the density bonus. 10% of those 57 units is closer to 6 than 5. So I think both for the 2 concessions and for the flat base density bonus, I think 6 units would be required. It's a question for the attorney, so I would like to ask that the Commission approve a request, as part of our approval, that the Commission request that the City Attorney give an opinion on those 2 questions to be passed to City Council with the recommendation. Did anybody want to reopen public comment? There was some waving from the audience at one point. Anything else we need to hear about? I don't think so. I think we're good to go. I'm not sure where to insert that. Maybe I could just make a motion now that we ask for that attorney's opinion to be passed to council with our recommendation. Is that fair? So I'll make that motion. Anybody wish to second?
Do you want to make a motion on the whole project, or do you want to just...
No, I'm just doing this as a separate motion.
Separate request.
My motion, right, is that staff request a city attorney opinion on those 2 questions to be included with our soon-to-be voted on recommendation.
I think that's important. I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion of that?
The only discussion I have is, Ben, I'm really glad you're a mathematician.
I'm sure I am.
The 2 questions.
Because I am just like following you like the bouncy ball. So, yeah.
Commissioner Brady.
Sorry, the 2 questions just being the concession and...
the requirement to be guaranteed 2 concessions and the requirement in order to trigger a 35% density bonus. Yeah.
From the 10.4.
Sorry? Yeah, so
okay.
The chart says if you have 10% very low, you get a 32.5% density bonus. If you have 11%, you get 35% density bonus.
Okay.
So do you think that there should be more than 17 units? Is that what you're saying from your calculation? Or
Are you saying there should be an additional low?
I'm saying in order to get that 17, I think it would require 6 very low.
Rather than 5.
So I may be wrong.
How did we come to these numbers? Like, how did we determine this when we got our staff report?
Well, Commissioner Ford is correct that a strict reading of density bonus law says all density bonus calculations resulting in fractional units shall be rounded up to the next whole number. For us, we've been calculating the numbers and recalculating the numbers and recalculating the numbers, and we landed on 5 and started building from there, and we've not gone back to recheck those maybe. So it could be, and we'll go back and look, our local regulations allow rounding up and rounding down. State law, as it applies to the bonus units, says that you should round up. So it's a great question and good for us to go back and revisit it and consult with the city attorney. So yes, the number in that case would be 6, and then 6 very low, and then it would be 8 additional units from there. So the math sort of shifts around.
No, it would still be 9 additional units. Still be 9.
74 is the total.
Right. 6 out of the 48.
So,
that gives 17 additional, and then they're asking for 9 additional.
So, but the issue right now that's on the table, so to speak, is to approve or to put a motion forward, or to have a motion. Maybe could you just structure that language again, or?
Yeah. So my motion is that the commission request that staff request a city attorney opinion on the question of qualifying for the 35% density bonus and qualifying for the 2 concessions on the project. I would be quite comfortable with negotiating, okay, that's 6 out of the 48, that gives 17 additional units, then there are the 9 additional requested. I would be quite comfortable with 8 of those being deeded, so we're not changing the total number of deed. That would just move 1 from moderate to very low, for instance. I mean,
Yeah,
we
and
haven't
that-
talked about the 3, 5, whatever.
Yeah, and that's what I believe the applicant would want to do there.
Right.
Right.
Right, but that could be up to council after the, with the attorney's opinion about how those numbers actually fall out. So my motion that I think is before us and has been seconded is that the commission requests that staff request a city attorney opinion on those 2 questions to forward to council with our recommendation. Was that what you understood? You seconded it? Okay. Can we have a roll call on that?
Chair Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Nines?
Yes.
Commissioner Brady?
Yes.
Commissioner Hancock?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
All right. Are there any more comments about the overall project?
Having said what we said and voted what we voted, can we not proceed with this?
Yes.
With the anticipation of the answer?
Absolutely. That's why I made the motion the way I did, was so we could go ahead and make a recommendation, and that question would come with an attorney's opinion to council to decide.
Next thing, should we have a separate proposal regarding the park to bring that back to design review?
No, that will happen automatically. Final design review is a stage they have to go through before they build it. So it will go back to design review committee without us doing anything. I believe I'm correct. Okay. So we don't have to do anything about that. We're up to, if somebody wishes to make a motion, you can find it in your packet. Anybody find it yet? Commissioner Brady, would you like to make a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion to approve resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending City Council approval of preliminary design review for Cotati Station Apartments, a mixed-use development consisting of 74 multifamily units and 5,540 square feet of commercial space on 2.42 acres, a public park on 0.49 acres, a community parking area of 0.65 acres, together with a use permit for a density bonus, with concessions and waivers required to implement the project for a total of 74 units. Should I add attachment F? Or
Yes, thank you. We should, the motion should include the late to packet add of the condition.
including condition F.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Nines?
Yes.
Commissioner Brady?
Yes?
Commissioner Hancock?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
No.
All right. Now we move on to, thank you. I think that concludes the business matters, and we'll go on to reports by staff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The city engineer is with us tonight, so if he's willing, it might be a great opportunity for you to hear from him on the status of the capital projects that are going on. A couple of other things that the planning department is working on, community development is working on, is a fee deferral program, which is an economic development tool. It's not fully developed yet, but we're going to be bringing that forward to the council this month. And as it stands now, it would allow the deferral of some impact fees to occupancy, which would seem to help several of our projects, including a commercial project that you looked at a while back. The applicant that's with us tonight has another project at 100 Valparaiso. That one we're still tying up the environmental issues, but that one, or environmental review, but that one should be coming forward to DRC hopefully in a few weeks. and then coming on, obviously, to this body. Out on Ward Drive, we have the 3 last homes that are under construction over there of the, John Roberts, off John Roberts Drive. So those last 3 homes are under construction. You might have noticed at 50 West Cotati, the new house is being at the corner of West Cotati and El Rancho. That didn't go through design review or planning commission because it was a rebuild. Single lot rebuild, but that one should be under construction with sticks in the air shortly, so that's nice to have that older, dilapidated structure removed. We talked a little bit about the climate action plan earlier. That plan was adopted by the RCPA board, but it suffered a legal challenge, so we're waiting for that to resolve before we bring that forward through our local adoption process. We've been working on the wayfinding program, so we've got a lot of the groundwork done on that. We're trying to get everything in place to make a grant proposal in the spring. The department requested proposals from several firms to help us develop an economic development action plan. So we got several proposals back on that, and we're in the process of reviewing those. Hope to issue a contract really shortly on that. There'll be a little bit of behind-the-scenes work going on with background work and analyses, and then there will be coming forward with some public meetings on that. And then finally, what will be coming up for the council shortly, our new building code adoption will happen before the end of November. And we have a code enforcement program that we're drafting and developing, and will also come forward to the council hopefully before the end of the year. So we've been busy. And let me see if the city engineer would come up and do a quick update for us.
Wherever you like.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, so we're in the month of October, and as you can see, most of the improvements have been completed on Old Redwood Highway from 116 to La Plaza. But there's one final push to go. There is a week from tomorrow, we're looking to pave the entire stretch. And so the remainder of this week we'll see some dig outs being done to patch up the worst conditions of that roadway. And then 2 days next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be seeing big trucks coming through there just laying down a brand new roadway. And over at the pedestrian plazas at the 116 and Old Redwood Highway, you saw the finishing layer going on the CMU block walls. That is now ready for the mosaic to be put on, applied. And the mosaic has been, over the last couple of months, being fabricated in the shop, so to speak, in the artist's studio. And so Mario, the artist, Uribe, will be applying that to the walls in sections. So that'll be very exciting to see take shape, because that'll add a lot of splash of color, of course, to the plazas. Through the downtown, once we have the paving done, and then the downtown's kind of in holding pattern right now as we get the crosswalk stamping materials and thermoplastic that'll form the diagonal herringbone brick look. We're going to have those crosswalks installed from one end of town to the other, from the 116 all the way through Page Street. Very consistent look for those crosswalks. They'll all be brand new. And then at Page Street, there'll be an in-roadway lit crosswalk, push button, the roads light up, and as well as the signs, as well as another one on La Plaza. So that'll increase pedestrian safety getting across that thoroughfare. We had a water project on West Cotati Avenue that part of it is finished up. It's completed, the paving, everything, upsizing a 4-inch to an 8-inch water main for fire flows, and that was a master plan identified project. all the services got hooked up. We had both lines, the old one and the new one, live at one point, and then before it got switched over. The second part of that project is to do a master meter over there at the Oliver Shopping Center. We have half a dozen meters that are on private in that parking lot, which is awkward. It's not per our standards. So we're bringing that out to the public right-of-way. And those are the highlights. Be happy to respond to any questions.
Questions?
I have a question. On the new crosswalk on Page, does that have any voice when you press it, like they do with Montgomery Village, you know, like it has a...
The crosswalk?
The crosswalk.
Have been activated.
Yes.
No, it will not, but the one over on 116, the signalized intersection there, it was an interesting process. We had to misspell Gravenstein Highway so that it could pronounce it properly. So that's getting a new verbal voice commanded system there. And I forgot to mention the street lights have been in for a while, and they're just now getting energized. So a few of them are lit up right now, and as PG&E walks, goes down the roadway and continues to hook them up, I expect them to be up and running, all of them, by the end of this week.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Onat.
I had a citizen bring up the fact, or ask the question, on the south end of Old Red, did they put asphalt over paving stones?
No. Over the bridge, the Cotati Creek Bridge, those paving stones were removed. They were all completely removed out of there. And then the crosswalks were also about a foot thick of solid concrete, so that had to be removed as well. It was loud through downtown for a lot of the month of September, and with a lot of the jackhammering, all of that concrete out. So it was removed.
Do you want to ask the question you asked last time about the streetlights downtown?
No, I asked the question yesterday, I heard it last time.
Okay,
I think you should
we got the answer. Okay. Anything, Commissioner Brady? Okay. The coloring in the crosswalks, it'll be a brick red, like, do you know?
There's much discussion on that.
Oh, okay.
It's going to match as best we can what was done at Centero Way, the topic. With the depot, the train station parking lot project that was completed a year and a half ago, there was a crosswalk that was put there.
Right.
And so
across East Cotati, you mean, that one?
Across Centero Way, if you're just going up East Cotati and you're crossing over, it's, yes, both ways.
It's on all
both
three
ways.
sides, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to mimic, so that we have a consistent look.
All right. My worry was that blends in a little. It's kind of hard to see, so anyway, I'll let you figure that out. Any more questions? Commissioner Hancock.
So just a quick one. On the trees that went in on 116, which was good to see that they actually went in, but are they being monitored at all? Because they went in a really hot period for their health.
Yes, the contractor has been irrigating the trees and ensuring that they're healthy. And if anything were to happen to them, there is a maintenance period, a 1-year maintenance period on those trees. So if the trees were to die, they would be replaced. So certainly the easy route is to keep them alive and healthy and flourishing. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. All right, thanks much.
All right, thank you.
Any more reports from staff?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any reports from commissioners?
I just have a question. Are we going to be doing the December conference at Sonoma State?
They have sent out the save the date for it. I have not seen registration materials yet. If people are interested, if commissioners are interested, just please email me, and when the registration papers come out, Carrie and I will fill those out and get them in for everyone.
Okay. I think it's the first week of December. I got something from Rue.
Yeah, it's usually the first Saturday.
She sent that little save the date for us.
Right. All
Yeah,
right.
that was my only thing to ask about.
Anything else? Okay, and we're adjourned.